Welcome. We missed last month's meeting because it was December, and December was just too busy for everyone. So we hope you had a great December and welcome to January. And this meeting is to plan for February's Going Deeper groups. And we'll start with we'll start actually, those of you who already changed your names, we invite everyone to also to be inclusive to all members of our group, to include your pronouns next to your name. And I think examples are next to Katie and mine and Wendy and Jenny's name. So if you want to add those, that would be great.
Mine will just disappear.
I don't know how to do it. Yeah.
I think if you go into the three dots next to the mute button in your square, there's a place to say rename, and you can add it on. And your groups have been meeting for 4 months. Wow, 4 months. And today we're going to be experimenting with the February's Beloved Community material and are going to be discussing about possibilities and including prompts to encourage you and your groups to go even deeper. So we're excited about that. And our chalice lighting today is by Henry Nowen. And it says, community is the place where the person you least want to live with always lives. That person is always in your community somewhere. In the eyes of others, you might be that person. Welcome. So, before we do a check-in, we also, so was it in, when was it in? So November, right? November, yeah. November, we talked about adding a couple things to our covenant. And I'll put the covenant in with the two bottom ones are the ones that we added. And we talked about sitting with these and then affirming them now to everyone. And the two areas that we added are with this little, what is that called? Little star thing?
Asterisk.
Thank you. Asterisk. Be a model for holding space, holy interruption, and deep listening as facilitators. And be a model for the shared circle of covenant community. No fixing, no saving, no setting each other straight. Any thoughts about those two additions? Comments? What that might look like?
I have a question. Did those get added because people are having problems with those things, or did you decide that they would be good additions?
So I think, and Katie can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think these are things that have come up in our Going Deeper facilitators trainings of not problems, but areas that were important to be in a covenant. And so that's why they were looked at as being added.
Yeah, in November, we went back and revisited the purpose of going deeper, and really brought in that concept of deepening spiritually, making sure that we get to know each other not just at a surface level, but getting to know each other more deeply, letting our souls show up. I know the word soul was problematic for some folks. But really taking the time as we, a group of facilitators, to be a model for the groups that we then facilitate. So that's where the thinking behind those came from.
Thank you.
So is this something that the group here, and we can take names down that have affirmed it and then check in with those that aren't here tonight? Feel comfortable with having part of the as a covenant? Thumbs up. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think they're not only part of the covenant, but they're giving people, and maybe that's what the covenant is, but help and guidelines for how to talk to each other and how to listen to each other. So to me, that's the value of putting it down, or making it explicit rather than implicit.
Yeah. It's how we're going to be in relationship with one another. I think it's important. All right. Okay. So it has been a while since we have been together. And so love to check in with you and spend, a couple minutes. How has leading a going deeper group been over the last 2 months impacted your spirits? What effect are you seeing on your community? And what do you need to set down to be fully present today? So a lot has happened since we have met. A lot has happened since we have met. And so any of those that speak to you, all of them, feel free to check in. Today was a very exciting day for most of us. How you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll lead off. That's fine. My group has been just absolutely lovely. I have found myself, it seems as though like every time the day comes up, I think to myself, oh God, I don't really feel like doing this today. And then I go to the group, and by the time I'm done, I'm like, God, I'm so glad I did this today. And so it's really sort of lovely. It's been lovely. The interaction between the group has been very respectful, sticking to all the covenants that you've mentioned here without any issues whatsoever. People really come prepared to talk about themselves and what the topics mean to them, which I think is extremely important. And everyone has said at the end how much the community means to them for being in the group. It means everything to the people that show up every 2 weeks, to have that connection with other people. So I feel as though it's accomplishing what JUC would really like to accomplish being there. I don't think I was in November's group, the training facility that month, probably because it's my birthday month. I have a feeling something probably happened around then. Everybody in our family's birthday is in November, so I might have missed that one. But it's been really gratifying and lovely, and I write down notes every session that we have, and some of them I've sent to you guys occasionally, and some of them I've just kept to myself. Not sure whether that's actually helpful or not. Sometimes inspired to send them to you, and other times like the group is really a very nice tight-knit community of various ages and things, and it's been really lovely. And I do look forward to it every couple of weeks, even though on the actual day it comes up, sometimes you're just kind of like, eh. But then it all works out. It's like, oh, I'm so glad I did that. I feel so good after it's over. So it's nice. There you go.
Nice.
Hope that wasn't too long.
No,
Okay.
great.
I find the same thing in our group. We've lost a few members, but the people who have stayed are getting really tight. We've had a couple of one woman lost her father, another's husband had a stroke. I mean, we've had some really, bad personal issues, and oh man, the group circles the wagons, and it really has become a beautiful little community. So it's been great, actually.
Nice. Wonderful.
Tag on to that, just because I too often feel like, oh my God, by 7 o'clock at night, I'm exhausted. And well, two things I want to say about that. One is inevitably the contact, the kind of connection and groundedness that I get, and I think we all get in our group, always leaves me energized. It's really, as many times as that's happened to me, I'm always a little bit amazed that it does, and it does. The other thing I just want to say, because I think I want to keep it in my mind, is that I think sometimes we get a little too maybe concerned about time, but it's like holding that space and really not letting people just kind of jump in right on the tail of what somebody else is saying is it's not a chat. It's just something to be mindful of, because it's not like I want to necessarily give a lecture about that every time or something like that, but just to kind of try to model or mention breathing and holding that space, and people letting what other people say, really let it settle before somebody, it's not exactly jumped in, but somebody else starts with what they want to say. So I'm glad to be reminded, sort of just kind of, okay, take that in, be more aware.
I'll piggyback on that. In education, we used to call that precious think time that I always taught kids to try to have, and just spend 10, 15 seconds to think about what the other person has said before they respond. And I think in this kind of group, it's just really important too to have that silence and think about what the other person has said before you jump in. Our group has become rather small, but it's wonderful to be able to be almost intimate with each other and share deep thoughts about the kind of concepts that we're studying, and really, really get to know each other. We've also had some tragedies in our group. One person lost her husband, and she then dropped out of the group, and other things that happened and among our people. And so I tried to bring them back, but some people just, weren't able to do that. So it's really, really nice to have a small community with this as well. So I'm always our group is in the morning. So it's kind of, sometimes I just have to remember to set my alarm and get up really early and make sure to get dressed and ready to go. And everybody's always energized and ready to go. And I feel really good about that they're right there and ready for me. And sometimes I'm on there really early and able to connect with some of the people before the starting time. And that's just a wonderful time for all of us. And I often get emails from people in between and letting me know some things that are happening with them. And it's just become a really precious time to connect with these people because they're just really special to me now. And I think that's happened with all the groups that I've ever worked with, that I've ever facilitated, that the people have become very special to me in some way, in different ways for every group. And I'm really growing with this group, like I've grown with all the groups that I've worked with. And it's been different ways with each group, but I think you develop a special kind of a relationship with every group that you work with. And I'm beginning to feel that happening now in a different way with this group. That's it for me.
So I'm finding the same thing in both of my groups. Thinking back to November, I just didn't feel as calm about it as I do now. I think we've just kind of become a much more deeper and caring group for each other. And everybody's used to Zoom now. That makes a big difference. And I think I just am really enjoying both groups. They just really seem to be, it's comfortable, I guess would be the best for comfortable. I think for everyone. My ongoing group, which is, they're pretty close to each other. One of them asked if we could spend a lot of time on the riot last Monday. And I wasn't sure about that, but I thought, well, I'll just leave it up to the group. And everybody wanted to. And I think it turned out to be the right decision. We didn't get into debates or too much emotion. I think the conversation got to be really more about racism. So it was good, and I think everybody felt better just to have time to process and do both deep listening and being able to just speak their mind about it. It was a little hard to get back to imagination after we did that, but we did a little bit, so all's good.
Nice. Well, anyone have anything else that they want to share and check in that you kind of missed? Darren.
I just wanted to say one thing our group did vote on, which we implemented, was we reduced the time from 7 to 8:30. They did not want to go 2 hours from 7 to 9, even though 2 hours, the 7 to 9 gives us more time to have sort of a second share and a little more discussion. I think some of the group gets tired, is probably a good way to say it, and they were not up for continuing. It was a suggestion made by 2 of the members, and then we voted, and everybody said, yeah, no, we're fine with an hour and a half. Let's do that. And so it's tight, but we still get it done.
What difference have you noticed other than being tight? Anything else?
I think people are very much on point because they know we have a limited amount of time to get there. So we don't have anybody that gets too carried away with whatever it is that they're trying to share. So that's nice. I mean, everybody's really cognizant of the amount of time that we have. So I think they can all see the clocks in the corner of their computers, and everybody sticks to what they've got. Okay. So I just want to make sure, I don't know whether that was like supposed to be a no, but since the group voted on it, I wasn't inclined to say, no, it must be 2 hours.
You must stay here.
You must stay here.
Even if you're asleep, even if your kids are screaming in the background.
I have two 83-year-old gentlemen in the group that they are, they're done at 8:30. So
Understand.
Anyways, that's all. I just want to make sure you guys knew that that was one modification you made to the existing format.
Thanks.
Both of my
Okay.
groups, we don't have a cutoff time at all, but they seem to be just done after about an hour and a half. You know, there's just no more conversation. It just
Right.
comes to a natural end. Sometimes it goes a little bit over, but I found that it would be difficult to just try to persist for that extra half hour.
How did you decide on no cutoff time, Judy?
I just let the group go until there wasn't any more discussion. And then I'd make a sweep, you know, anything that's come to mind. I'd make a couple of sweeps, but it just seemed to end naturally.
Yeah. That's interesting. And Kathy, Lynn, and Pam, how do you time your group?
Well,
Pam, I can't hear you.
My
Mine
dog was
just,
barking.
Oh,
they were very adamant that they could not go the 2 hours. You know,
Yeah.
we tried it and they were very adamant. They felt like they were really being pushed too far. And, you know, we talked about the need to get through the agenda, so to speak. We didn't call it agenda, but the materials. And
mhm.
so I said, well, let's give it a try. You know, let's see if we can get through the materials an hour and a half and still do a quality job. And they agreed to that. And so for the next couple times, we worked hard on not wasting time and not moving, you know, not wasting time, just really kind of working hard to get through the materials and trying to stay on task and those kind of things. And we were able to get through it in an hour and a half. And they all agreed that, you know, they would try to keep that going and try to not waste any time. And I agreed that if we could do that, then we'd stick with the hour and a half. And that's what we've been doing.
Yeah. We didn't even talk about it. We just kind of, like Judy said, there just comes a point where nobody really has anything left to say. We've gone through everything. And so we just end it when it ends. I like not saying we're only going to do an hour and a half, because then we
It's
have
open.
that freedom. Yeah. And afterwards, it also gives us a little, you know, coffee time
Yeah.
to talk to each other, because things come up and we know we can't, you know, talk about those single things, but then afterwards people will get together and talk.
Yeah, I would say, I feel as though the thing that gets lost in that is during the meeting, I take a lot of notes. And at the end of the sessions, when we were doing 2 hours, I would go back through and look for any commonalities, like, you know, who picked which quotes, or if someone didn't choose a particular quote, like if there was one that was just left on the table, I'd actually ask the group why. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So I find that with an hour and a half, I don't have the same luxury to go back and do that. But then again, the people are covering the material that they wanted to talk about.
Right.
So that's the loss. And then the gain is that no one falls asleep while we're on the call and starts snoring. So
True.
well,
Yeah.
It's true.
well, what I'm, you know, I'm thinking about it now. It seems like even though we're a bunch of old people, it seems like we pretty much take up the whole 2 hours.
Okay.
But because once there's such a flow once we start,
Yeah.
you know, that by the time everybody sort of has their time. But what we do is we meet from 7 to 9. And if it gets to be 9:15, then that's our kind of our signal or our sign to each other that now we're going to do the closing circle and
Okay.
the closing words. Although I'll have to say the closing words at the last one were weird. I don't know if they were just strange. And so we said, skip those. We had already dissected them. But anyway, it seems fairly organic. One time we did stop after an hour and a half because it just seemed like everybody was ready to.
Mhm.
But mostly we use the 2 hour format.
Interesting. Yeah, Darren.
Oh, well, go ahead. You go ahead, and
No, I mean you're all sharing kind of different perspectives of it, and it seems organic and seems that nothing is missing from what you're doing. That it's that it's meeting the needs of the group.
For the record, I would have actually preferred to stay with 2 hours, but since the group voted the other way, I'm just I'm just your friendly neighborhood facilitator, so
Right.
I had to go ahead and let that one go. I had a question for the group. What was it your intention that we pick out a chalice lighting ourselves each session? Because in years past there was a chalice lighting that showed up with the materials, and I've been wondering about that and wanted to ask.
Jenny?
Not to put you on the spot or anything.
Yeah, well, since we did change our format pretty drastically, I don't know when that was, I guess 3 or 4 months ago. And to be honest, I hadn't really thought it through. I hadn't really realized that we used to stick that in, and now I haven't been, so I follow my little template. Would you prefer to have one in there, or would you prefer to find one?
Sort of enjoyed finding one, actually, rather than first we said, oh, there's no chalice lighting, and then we said, is that intentional? Did they whatever? And but it's kind of nice to think about what for you connects yourself to the material, and that's kind of
little faith formation in there, Lynn.
Huh, is that what that is?
Yeah, that's what that is.
I mean, maybe a suggested one, and then if you want to, because I always open it up to the group when I send out the packet. I'll say, does somebody want to do the chalice lighting for this week? And I would like to continue that, but if nobody volunteers, it would also be nice if we had the option.
So I want to share a little story, and I don't know, Darren, if you all did this in coming of age last year, but in visiting our coming of age class this year and our high school, I discovered, because there's always a chalice lighting, and then underneath it was, or a chalice lighting of your choosing. So what I discovered was how that chalice lighting is read is that they read the chalice lighting and they say, or a chalice lighting of your choosing as part of the chalice lighting.
That sounds like 8th graders.
And high schoolers.
And
high schoolers do it too. And the first time I heard that, I was like, what? And they just were laughing and laughing and laughing. They just thought it was the funniest thing. So I mean, I think, Jenny, you could include one, and that you can still invite participants to bring one, or you can still look for one yourselves.
And I'll stick in there, or a chalice lighting of your choosing, which you're free to read that as well.
Yeah,
no, you're not. No, you're not free to read that.
Right in the middle, Jenny.
I kind of feel like there's so many great readings that are potentially available from the JUC faith, genre or stable of stuff that's out there. I would love it if you would include one, because a lot of times there's just, some people don't have a lot of exposure to Unitarian faith. And so people love the quotes that we do in the readings. And so I think they would really love the quote for the chalice lighting as well. I certainly have experienced before in other groups where someone actually did their share based upon the chalice lighting. Mm-hmm. So it's another, another resource that's available to.
And they get sent the packets?
Yes.
Okay. So your group gets sent the packets?
Yeah, I do some doctoring before I send mine out to remove the prompts for the
Okay.
facilitators, so I don't
Okay.
send them the stuff with the italicized
Okay.
things and stuff like that. But yes, they
Okay.
get sent the packets for sure.
Great. And then that's fabulous. Good. Good.
I don't know if everybody does that, so I didn't mean to speak for everyone.
I do.
I'll
Okay.
tell you what was something that surprised me. We've had people who started sort of going into the taking it home section. And the last one was on Black science fiction. And we had a very interesting kind of contributions around that. And so I'm glad of that, that people are sort of taking their own initiative to explore the material a little bit further. Is that faith formation too?
That's faith formation too.
Lynn, you're becoming our poster child right before our
And
very
now
eyes.
I gotta go. I'm sorry.
Oh no,
That's it. Done.
Sorry.
Katie, whatever you can do to leave her in this room.
Yes. Lock it. Lock it. Lock it. Oh.
Well, I'm just going to say kudos to Lynn for that one, because a lot of times my group appears to not actually read the materials until just shortly before we start. And I always have read through them and look at the taking it home section, because there's some real pearls in there, or there have been since we started for sure. And at the end of this last session, I brought up that very same section, Lynn, that you're talking about, and said, does anybody know anything about Black science fiction writers? And nobody knew anything about it except me.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about it either.
But it wasn't because I'd read the section, which I thought was actually even more fascinating. There was even better resources in there than I knew that were available. So I started sharing with the group some of the stuff that I'm already aware of, and they all wanted links and they all wanted stuff. I'm like, guys, this stuff is right there at the back of the packet.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, I think, Darren, it's because we're all old and we're retired. So we have more time.
Yeah.
So, in moving to what we're looking at for February, have any of you looked at the packet for February? Okay. So, was anyone at service this last Sunday? Wendy, you were there?
But don't give me a test on it, please.
Okay. So basically we're Wendy, would you like to share what the service introduced, if you remember?
Sure. Thanks for the vote of confidence. And you say you were Jules?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it introduced the 8th principle, that we have these 7 principles, and there's an 8th one proposed, and our board has said really want the church to wrestle with this, and would love to put it to a vote. And we want that to be really intentional, right? Because as a principle, it's hard if that was put in front of the congregation, it would be hard, I suspect, for our congregation to vote against something that said we want to be anti-racist. But the ask is much deeper, right? Because the ask is not just, do you agree with the statement, but are you willing to do the work in yourself and in our congregation to dismantle the racism in us, the white supremacy culture in us individually, in our church, and in institutions more generally. And as I named, that's super hard work, but I suppose in part in honor of ML King weekend, but I bring this up from time to time anyway, and just did a couple of weeks ago. King said that the church at its best is the moral guardian, right, of society. And it's easy for me to imagine that in our church, we might say, yeah, well, we're on that because We think we vote right, and we think we do all kinds of things right, and we do a lot right, and we're loving good people. And are we looking at maybe the things that we don't do so well? So that's the real invitation.
So, and this February being beloved community, that is the focus. And part of the 8th principle is beloved community. And so one of the things that I kind of hope for in February's Going Deeper groups is this courageous space in Going Deeper. And does anyone have so courageous space is, at one time it was considered you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah.
At one time it was considered safe space, and at one time it was considered brave space, and now it's kind of transitioned to courageous space. And that is a space where, I don't know, Katie, do you want to share anything about that, or you want me to continue? Me? Okay. And that is a space where, it's not an easy space. It's not a comfortable space necessarily. It is a space that you can dive a little deeper into your learning, a place where you can take risks and be you can challenge things, you can ask questions, you can be vulnerable, and learn. It's not a place that you come from learning, that you actually come from a place where you are trying to learn. Does that make sense? Wendy, do you have anything to add to that?
I guess, one of the ways that we can be with each other is self-protective. I mean, that's a common way to be. So we can say things that we know the group will agree with, or that are the side of us that we know people like or are used to, or something like that. And courageous space is that space that I think at our best, right, is in church. If you look at A. Paul Davies, who said, and James Luther Adams said, church is a great place to practice meaning what it is to be human. And life is a great place to grow a soul, right? If you look at those things in combination, then we don't just grow into our best selves by being the part of ourselves that's already been pre-approved, that we've already gotten good check marks for. And so what we hope for in church space, I think, as courageous space, is this place where we can love each other enough to try out different parts of ourselves, that where we can experiment, as it said in faith formation, since that's the theme tonight, we can learn, right? We can experiment and learn into that. And and so when you think about, it's really easy to say the opinions we hold that we know everybody agrees with, and it's more difficult to say that we've had a change in opinion. And one of the things that I quickly reference on this, so I don't start preaching, Jules, I promise I'm wrapping up. But if you remember, Obama came forward at one point and in supporting marriage equality, he said, you know, my mind has changed on this, right? I used to not believe this. I'm a Christian man and I was raised to believe, and I had these beliefs, and I now have lived in the world, and there are people on my staff and people teaching my kids and people in the blah, blah, and the blah, blah, and blah, blah. And I see them as good and loving people, and I can stand with this. Well, when I look at that statement, then, you know, how did he come to that? He had to have, it's not like he was cracked out of an egg. He had to grow into that. He had to say, boy, I'm not so sure about this thing I learned anymore, and I want to try on something else. Well, you know, as a minister, you know, I want people in these small groups. I mean, that's the point of the covenant, is we're going to hold each other. We're going to we're going to build trust with each other so that we can not just convince each other how good we are, but so that we can say, God dang, I'm really wrestling with this. Okay, I can launch into the second phase. I'm nipping it.
Okay. And in our work in racial development and our work in anti-racism, anti-oppression, we tend to want to be perfect. We tend not to want to say something wrong. And that tends to keep us exactly where we are. If we don't make mistakes, if we don't stumble on ourselves, then we don't learn. And so in that courageous space, it is an ability to make mistakes and to be held in a community that if you say something wrong, or if you are questioning, or if you're asking questions to try to understand things better, that you're held in that. And it's an encouragement to go a little bit deeper, to go deeper into this work. And so in this month, as facilitators, we're asking kind of two things of you, in that one, you encourage that little even deeper, going even deeper in February's going deeper, and that you hold yourselves in that courageous space, because it's a harder space when people are feeling vulnerable. And I want to give you some examples of what we're asking for, and encouraging you to be in, as facilitators. In the going deeper, when hold on, I'm trying to see you and look at the training, so sorry, the packet. So the prompts are about beloved community. One thing that I'm not sure how you do the readings, if you read them or if you invite people to read them themselves. How does that usually work in your groups?
Maybe raise your hand if you do the readings.
So if you read them yourselves, raise your hand. If you have them read themselves quietly, do you have them share the readings? Yes.
You mean like we usually go around, like, let somebody read each one.
Okay. Is that how it Is that how
We
you,
don't read the questions because it just gets to be too many words.
okay.
Too
So
much to
you all share, like, so that somebody in the group will will read the reading.
Yes.
Judy, how do you usually do it? Same? Same. Okay, great. That's perfect. I love that. I love that there's different voices reading in the room and that everybody's like there's a form of participation in that. So I think that's perfect. In the questions, one of the things that we were looking for is two different areas. One is inviting participants to choose from a reading that there's not as much comfort with. So we tend to pick readings that we feel pretty comfortable with to respond to. And these readings this month are about beloved conversation, are about the 8th principle. And what is the third one, Jenny?
Oh, there's 4.
Dr. Martin
The
Luther
third-
King.
Beloved conversation, the 8th principle. What's your question? I'm sorry.
There was 3 readings. Martin Luther
Oh,
King.
I can find
Okay.
that in a minute. I can't pull that up without looking.
Okay. You
Not
don't
that
have it
good.
memorized? What you
No.
did a month ago?
So Martin Luther King's quote was about reconciliation, redemption, and the creation of the beloved community.
Okay, so beloved community.
Then we
8th
had
principle.
and we have the person who loves their dream of community will destroy community, but the
Right.
person who loves those around them will create community, by Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
That's good.
Yeah. So there's 3 that are pretty deep. My thought is most people will go with the one that Katie just said
Yeah.
because it's the most comfortable. So as facilitators, how can we encourage our participants to go with one that is a little deeper? Suggestions.
Jules, what do you mean by go with? What are you meaning?
Choosing one, because you usually choose one, right?
One question, one
From one of the readings, right?
reading. No,
We have that happen
do it
quite
differently.
a lot, actually. People challenge themselves a bit, to.
So they don't pick one of the readings?
They do. But I think, but people, not all the time, but will say, I've been thinking about this one and I'm not quite sure what it means or how it applies to me. And I think, isn't that what you're talking, rather than something that comes easily?
All right. So your groups, how they respond. What would it look like for them to go even deeper?
Well, I think you hit upon it, something that's not comfortable and that everybody else will agree with you. So being challenged to look at something that is uneasy, I think would be the way to approach that.
Right.
So
Right.
how, as facilitator, what would that sound like?
Just
Go ahead, Judy.
or just ask them to consider doing it, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, because I usually say, pick a question that touches your heart or something. And so I'll just have to, change that a little to this week. Let's look at the question that challenges you the most and maybe preface it with, we know it's difficult, but don't worry if you trip up on it, because we're in a courageous space.
Mhm.
Darren?
I would probably make the group go around in a circle and say which quote they like. I just record it on the piece of paper that I keep my notes on.
Mhm.
And then after getting what everybody's got for their quotes, 1, 2, or 3, I would invite them to choose one of the ones that was not their choice.
Mhm.
Tricky.
I mean, because if
Right.
you
Yes.
don't, then they're liable to not really
Right.
tell you what it is. So if that's really what we're shooting for, that's how I would choose to do it. And I think that is enough of a challenge coming straight from me, that will cause them to look into going a little bit deeper than they're used to going to, because everyone does.
So would you
cover what doesn't
explain
cover it.
why you're asking them to do that?
I would actually tell them that I will explain why at the end.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'd save the best for last on that one.
Okay.
Especially because of this particular topic. Having covered this, I knew I'd seen this with someplace before. I couldn't remember where it was, but it was in COA. We covered this and tried to get the kids to talk about the 8th principle and what they would think about it. And now I remember it. And so I think in some ways, the less said, the better for the materials that are there. And I'm very interested to see what my group will choose. I wonder how many of them actually know anything about the 8th principle. I'm not sure.
Kathy?
I, of course, have gone over the materials in advance. And so when I know it's going to be something difficult and they need to go really deep into it in order to understand it, this is going to sound strange to some of you, but I have them read the questions before someone reads the quote.
Oh, I like
Because that's something as a reading specialist, I always did with kids of any age, and even when I did it with adults. So it's almost like giving them something I always taught was giving them purposes for reading. But with adults, it's hard to do that, to give them verbal purposes for reading. So if you read the questions before you read the actual paragraph, especially if it's in a paragraph, they're giving themselves their own purposes for reading. So I have them read the questions before someone reads the paragraph. And by now I know the people who are better readers than others. And so I always choose the better readers, the people who read with inflection and purpose, to be the ones who read that paragraph. So that is a strategy that I use, because the way they actually read the paragraph, I know if they know why they're reading it, for what purpose, then they're going to automatically, I don't know what word I want to use, but they're automatically going to emphasize the words and the paragraph, the words and the parts of the paragraph that they need to do that in order to stress the parts of that paragraph that will answer the questions themselves. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So in other words, all the extraneous parts of that paragraph that are not all that important to answering the questions and to really understand why they're reading that don't need to be emphasized as much. So the carefully reading that paragraph itself is going to help them really understand
Right.
why they're reading it and answer the questions. So it's kind of like how you read the paragraph itself. And so there have been a couple times when the questions were so badly written and so difficult that I was the one who read the paragraph because I knew I could read it better. And so I did that a couple times, not very often, but a couple times I did that. I read the questions, or they read the questions, and then I read the paragraph because I knew that I could read the paragraph in a way that would emphasize words and parts of sentences to help them better understand it in a way that would answer the questions. You understand that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, I think my encouragement to everyone is really, Darren came up with kind of a strategy that will work for him.
Okay.
Judy, you seem to have a strategy for yourself in your group. And I encourage everyone to think of a strategy. Pam, I think you came up with one for yourself.
You're muted again.
Muted. Mute.
I really like the idea of reading the questions first, because so often I'm on one tangent and then the questions are totally different.
Yeah.
And so I assume maybe other people are doing that too. So I'm gonna add that little trick. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
One time I was asked to come in, and it was at the School of Mines of all places, but they needed someone to help freshmen understand what they were reading, because they were wonderful, excellent readers, but they didn't know how to read technically. And so someone gave them my name, and someone called me and they asked me to come in and help these freshmen learn how to read technical materials. And so that's what I did, is go in there and just for 4 or 5 times teach them strategies for how to read technical material and give them purposes for reading and all that kind of stuff, and it really made a difference for them. And so this
That's
was kind
wonderful.
of the same thing,
Yeah.
just
Well,
in a whole different way.
So-
my go ahead, Wendy, and then Darren.
Well, so I just want to jump
And
in,
Lynn.
and Jules, you were probably maybe you were gonna go here, and but I just want to say, like, I love the strategy. I love that there's an idea, and certainly, there are better readers among us, and there are, even with the worship associates, right? Some of the worship associates with more of a scientific reading is this one, and with poetry it's somebody else, right? So we all read different things better, but there's a difference, right? And here we are again, Lynn, at the intersection of faith and formation. But there's a difference between so what you're offering, I think, Kathy, is this tool to sort of grok the question, to understand the question. But and that's important. People have to understand the question, be able to put themselves in it. And we're asking for something more than an intellectual response.
Right.
We're asking for a wrestle into the application of it, and the feeling of it, and how does it guide my life, and how do I see my life in reflection. And so certainly understanding the question is key to that. But let's keep in mind, boy and girls, or siblings in the struggle, that we are, that we're not trying to prove to each other how smart we are.
Right.
Because we're smart. We're enough.
Right.
I'll give you all a gold star. I'll mail you one if you want one. But what we're trying to do is, and so what? Now that you have
Right.
this piece of information, what are you going to do with it? Or how do you respond to this? What does it provoke in you? Sometimes it makes me really mad, right? Sometimes I just get so sad. Sometimes, it's just the full panoply of weather systems that are available. And sometimes, I'm from the upper Midwest, it's quite a mixture. So
Yeah.
so-
So personally, I learn more about myself. I learn more about my heart, my mind, all of that when I struggle with a question. When I really, really struggle with a question.
Right.
And so it is okay to struggle with a question. It is okay to sit and chew and be in a question.
Right.
And take a question home with you and continue to struggle with it. Because that's when we move. that's when we grow, and that's when we become.
Right.
And so that's what we're trying to encourage with this kind of going even deeper. And because this is the work that we're going, I mean, our whole congregation, we're inviting to be in different forms and in different ways in questions like these, and in this, racial development, and in anti-racism, anti-oppression work. And really looking at this eighth principle, not just, are we going to vote on it, how we're going to live it and how we're going to be it. And so this is just a little chance for us to kind of lean into that and go a little bit deeper into understanding what this means. And so that's the invitation to facilitators, is how to get there. And this isn't a test. This is just an invitation for all of you to lean into that and to go a little deeper with your groups. And
So
one of the, Katie?
So I have a thought that I want to share on this topic as well, but I also think, but if you're not done yet, Jules, go for it.
I was just going to move on to another thing, so go ahead.
I have something I want to ask about this too.
Okay. So one of the things so I'll share, then go to Lynn, then we'll go back to Jules. One of the things that I was reminded as I was reviewing the reason for going deeper, it is a space for us to practice being in community. And practice means that we're going to mess up. And practice means that we're going to make mistakes. And practice means that we're not always going to be perfect. And that is really important to keep in mind as we're talking about building the beloved community. And one thing that has shown up in our reflections on race groups is that sometimes we as facilitators will give the participants the permission to speak in draft, to think out loud with their answer to the question, to recognize up front that this is not going to be the perfect answer, that I am still wrestling with it. And I think that might be an important thing for y'all to have in your toolbox as you go into the February month, is offer people the opportunity to speak in draft about some of these big questions about the beloved community, because we're wrestling with it. We're trying to figure it out, and it's a work in progress. It's practice. It's not perfect. That's what I've got. Lynn, what was your question? Oh, and then.
Well, this keeps coming up for me, and since it's part of this next month, is around the eighth principle. And it's that part that says with accountability. It says, it talks about what we're working toward, or what we want to change in terms of ourselves or our world. But then it says with, I don't have it in front of me, but it's somewhere in there. It says with accountability. And I just would like a little comment on that. And, whenever I come across that, I go, somebody's going to check up on me. And, but I have a feeling that's not the idea. I don't quite know. But it would help to have you say a few words about that, because I'm sure it will come up in my group.
So beloved, so it says wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions.
It says with accountability.
That accountably,
not accountability.
Accountably.
Oh, interesting that's how I remembered it.
Yeah. Does that make more sense?
I read it again. Read it one more time.
Okay. I'll read it from the beginning. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions.
Well, I still think it's an interesting word in there. You know, whether that's about, demonstrating, I don't know. I'm curious how you hear that.
Being accountable by that my actions affect other people's actions, that by our actions that accountably dismantle. So I'm taking responsibility for dismantling, what I can for dismantling racism and other oppressions.
Well, I'm with you on that. I mean, it's the accountable
Well,
part.
I don't think so. I think what that says is that there hasn't been much accountability for that, has there?
Well, we could get in a whole discussion about that. But no, I know what
So
you're
I
saying,
think
of course.
if that's a question that comes up, that's a good
a good
area.
thing to discuss.
It's
Yeah.
a good thing for people. Why are they stuck on that word?
Yeah, why am I stuck on that word?
That's a good,
Yeah.
I mean, and so that's a good question to ask yourself. Of all the words, of all the things that are saying in there,
Yeah.
why is that an important word to be stuck on?
Well, yeah, okay. No, I get it.
No, I mean, and so, and it's worth investigating. It's worth, diving deeper into that for that person, of understanding that. Truly, it is.
No, I agree. I'm
Yeah.
just thinking about it for myself.
Yeah.
I guess I've been thinking of it on a personal, sort of like if you do this in the group and you're talking about it, but if it's the eighth principle, this is a whole nother discussion.
Right.
The eighth principle for the Unitarian Church, then, so anyway,
Yeah.
we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be a great conversation.
I think so.
So Darren, you had something?
Yeah, so I was just gonna say too, when I mentioned I wasn't gonna tell anybody till we got to the end, I'm also thinking of this in terms of there's 2 sessions in the month. And so if you can create the environment whereby people don't know what's coming, but you ask them to pick one of the ones that they didn't name, and then at the end you tell them this is why we're doing this, I feel like the second session for the month has an opportunity for people to really understand what's expected of them without hitting them on the head with it.
Exactly.
Exactly. So I've also looked at the materials for the second session, and I think they're very complimentary and good for what we're shooting for here.
Mm-hmm.
So I would encourage everybody to think of this as facilitators in terms of being a chance to grow from session 1 to session 2, and whatever strategy you take on to try to think what will work best for you in making that happen or making that a reality. Because that's what it feels like you're asking.
Uh-huh.
For me anyways, that's my takeaway is you're asking me to get them to go deeper without asking them to go deeper. If that makes any sense, because people react to that.
Right. Yeah, because if you announce, hey,
right,
we're gonna go deep today, then that automatically puts people,
and since a lot of my group has not selected any of the racially oriented prompts at all, this will be a good way to get there without, again, hitting them on the head with it and telling them you've got to do this. So that's my takeaway. Just don't forget about the second. Try to integrate whatever you guys see in the second packet that's there with whatever you're going to do with the first one, because it really is sort of a holistic month-long look at this beloved community that probably is worthwhile doing instead of just, this is the 8th principle. Oh, and if you want information on the 8th principle, there are a ton of links out there. If you just go look up why the 8th principle, you'll get a whole page of great articles if you're interested. I remember doing it. It still even comes up as something I read last time we were doing this.
Yeah.
With the COA group. So I
Yeah.
want to make sure we didn't forget about the second packet, because sometimes it's, so far we just talked about the first one, but it really is 2 sessions worth and not just one.
Yeah. Mm.
You know, and you may get some resistance, and that's okay. You know, resistance is our first response when something's uncomfortable. And you can invite, you know, if you're feeling like there's defensiveness in your group, which can happen as well, you can invite curiosity. And that is something we do with our reflections on race. Defensiveness is a go-to when we don't want to do something. If we're feeling, you know, maybe it's too close, maybe, you know, we want to push it away and become defensive. And one of the antidotes to that defensiveness is curiosity. So you can invite people that if that defensiveness stirs in them, to invite curiosity in. And breathing is important. Breathing is super duper important. Get as much oxygen into the brain, into the body as possible. Katie, was there anything else that you?
No, I think we've covered pretty much everything that we need to cover today. We will be doing our most popular time that we landed on for these sessions is 4:30 on the third Wednesday. And we will continue recording them so that things can be accessed after the fact. So our next one will be February 17th.
So if you want to review this will be available for people who couldn't make the meeting. And if you want to go back and review this meeting, you can. You'll make sure everybody has the link.
Yep, I will do bookmarks like I usually do, so you don't have to sit through the whole hour and 30 minutes.
Unless you want to for your faith formation.
I was going to say, what are you saying?
You're accountable, faith formation.
Exactly. So I will send that out to the Going Deeper Facilitators group in the next day or so.
Cool.
Well, it has been an absolute joy to spend this hour and a half with all of you. I've missed you.
Good discussion.
Yeah, really good. Really, really good. And to close, we will invite everyone to share a sentence, a few words about what you're going to take with you.
Curiosity.
Curiosity.
That was good.
Courage.
Explore the 8th principle.
Just going much, much deeper.
I've made lots of notes around going deeper as faith formation and spending more time with that.
Gives me hope to see you all working hard towards faith formation for yourself and other people. So showing up, even on Zoom.
You know, this was a courageous space tonight with all of us here.
Okay, Jules, you want to sing us out?
No, thank you. But Kathy, did you have something?
No, I feel like everything's been said. I just feel like listening right now.
Okay. Listening's good. No, I'm not gonna, I did my one time a year singing during the family Christmas Eve service. That's it for me.
Are you a singer, Jules?
One time a year. I sing all the time. It's not necessarily what other people want to hear.
He does a mean Ave Maria, right?
Okay. We have another singer here, right here. Katie, my beautiful Katie.
Oh yes, I know. Katie. Well, we had Katie wasn't at our worship on resilience in the evening, and I was like, who's gonna sing? But Katie sent us a nice video of this song, so
She's
that was very
a
good.
wonderful singer.
She is.
Aw, thanks, guys.
Well, you all have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you so much for the gift that you're bringing to our congregation with facilitating. You are a blessing.
And thank you all for your guidance. We appreciate that. And your
Yes.
wonderful participation today really gave us some great ideas. Thank you all.
Yeah, this was a good sharing.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. Take care.
All right, be well, everybody.
Good night.
Bye all.
Good night.
Good night.